I think that's the most exciting thing about this opportunity is that we have a clean slate to build something that's bigger and better than anything else in America, and not just America but even world renowned.
The Miami Makeover is officially underway. Hello everyone and welcome to the latest episode of Miami Total Futbol Radio, the first episode of 2021. I am your host on this week's podcast, and with me as always is my co-host, David Beckham's long-lost cousin, Steve Brenner. Steve, it's been a busy day, but it's our first episode back. So how was your 2021? How'd you bring it in, and how's the family doing?
Yeah, everyone's great, thanks. I brought it in by falling asleep at 11:30 on New Year's Eve. Just pure rock and roll to get ready for the new year. But new year, that means the sort of changes and people sort of take stock and take account. And it looks like Inter Miami have been doing that pretty comprehensively in the last few weeks. So a reboot for 2021, which I think in the end of the day was needed, and it's going to be exciting to see how it all develops.
It's been a few weeks since we've last been on. I think it was December 15th or the 16th was the last pod we had. On that pod, I will say, shameless plug, that I did mention Phil Neville as a possible coach to keep an eye on, and he is now Inter Miami's official head coach for this upcoming 2021 season. We'll touch on that. We'll touch on the Chris Henderson hire, as well as all the recent player moves and rumors. So a lot to talk about. We'll answer your questions as well. But of course, before we get into everything, just a reminder, everyone to give us a follow on our social media accounts. And that's again at Miami Total Futbol on YouTube and Facebook, at MIA Total Futbol on Twitter, and also now on Instagram. All right, Steve, so let's get to it. Steve, so let's dive right into it. There's plenty to talk about. And let's start with Phil Neville. There's two hires made today. Obviously, Phil Neville was hired as the head coach, and Chris Henderson as the sporting director / chief soccer officer. So two big hires, two positions that needed to be filled after Diego Alonso and Paul McDonough left the club or were given the boot over the past few weeks. Let's start with Phil Neville. What do you think about the hire, and what's your takeaway from that appointment?
Yeah, look, it's a great hire. I'm not saying that with my English hat on. I think he was wanting to break into the men's game for quite a while. He was applying for jobs, wasn't really getting any luck, and then this opportunity came around. I know the FA thought he was going to lead the Olympic team, the Team GB in the summer, and he kind of said that was his goal. But that's fine. I mean, he's keeping his options open. Okay, someone's going to get upset because they're going to be left out. But he's taken that clean break now, and what a great opportunity for him. That said, we know it's not going to be easy because he's not just going to come in here and work magic straight away. It helps that his mate David owns the team, which is a plus. But you kind of think this is the route, or that we expected them to kind of go down with this ownership, in terms of him bringing in someone that he knows. They played together nearly over 270 times for Manchester United during that great period when the Alex Ferguson's teams won pretty much everything. He's known Beckham since he was a teenager, so we kind of expected that. But I think when if you look back, I know it's in retrospect, it was such a rush, wasn't it, to try and get ready for the season. And I think they were just desperate just to try and get something on, a front office and a coaching team together, and maybe they were just a little bit rushed, and they gave it a year. It didn't work out the way they thought it was going to do, so they've made the change, and it kind of feels like it's got more of Beckham's sort of stamp over it. Before, it seemed more like he was being guided by maybe those that are on the ground here in South Florida. And it's interesting. Beckham's been in Miami for the last few weeks. He's been hands-on. He's been down at the club. And that's the most sort of involvement that we've seen sort of publicly for months. So I think that's a positive, because in the end of the day, a lot of it was about him and how he would mould and shape this club in the image of him as a player, which was someone that had the highest standards. And So he's gone for his old mate, who's a qualified coach, who did a decent job with the women's team, didn't really take them to that next level, and now he's got a big chance. It's a great chance for him, but it's not going to be easy.
So you said you think it's a great hire, and you said you don't have your England flag on, and it's not in the background of where you're sitting. But I'm going to go, and I think we're going to disagree and argue a little bit more this year. Just my opinion, just based on how I think we view the game. I don't know how you can call this a great hire. He's never been a coach of a men's team, the head coach of a men's team, and he's never coached a club team. I mean, I don't understand what qualifications he has other than the fact that he's a former teammate and someone David Beckham knows very well as to be the head coach of Inter Miami. I'm not sure about the hire.
His coaching ability should gives him the job in the first place. I mean, he wouldn't just appoint him without thinking that he was a decent coach, but anyway.
Inter Miami clearly has pushed the reset button, right? And they've gone, I think they hit a home run with Chris Henderson. We'll touch on him in a little bit. But I can't say the same with Phil Neville, because Phil Neville is still very much an unknown commodity as a head coach.
Unknown, yes.
It's relatively unknown. So we don't know. He could be good, he could be bad. But I don't, like, for a team that has these high ambitions and, like, is looking to become, once again, one of the biggest teams in this hemisphere, and Phil Neville said that in the opening remarks he had with the interview that he did with Inter Miami. Is he thinks his team can be a world-renowned team. So they have high ambitions. That hasn't changed. But does hiring a coach that hasn't proven a whole lot match those ambitions? I mean, I just don't understand what qualifications he has to have gotten this job for a team that wants to be so much. I don't see it. There's going to be calls of nepotism from people on both sides of the pond, because it is David Beckham's, not only his former teammate at Manchester United and his former teammate with the England national team, it's also a business partner. They both are in the ownership group of Salford City, a 4th division side in England. And they're also friends. You Google Phil Neville and David Beckham, and there's pictures of them eating together, pictures of them at the Eiffel Tower. They are friends. So this hire is clearly a David Beckham choice. But I don't know. I can't call it a great hire today. Maybe a year from now, if they've won MLS Cup, then I'll sing a different tune then. But as of right now, today, I don't see it. I don't even. Yeah, I just can't. I can't call that a great hire, man.
No, I mean, I don't think I said it was. I'm pinning my hopes it's going to be on a great hire. I just think it just seems to make sense. It didn't. Diego Alonso came in. It didn't work for many different reasons. I just think if you're going to have someone, if they've got these high aspirations, you need someone to sort of lead from the front publicly. And Diego Alonso don't think was that guy. I think Phil Neville is that guy. But yeah, in terms of coaching and MLS experience, zero. Very little coaching experience in the men's game, but has was seasoned player, had played in the Premier League for a number of years, well over a decade, played for England, worked under Sir Alex Ferguson, all that kind of stuff. I think that does all add in. You've got to start somewhere. I think this is a good opportunity for him. He managed England, although the women's team in the World Cup, got to the semi-final. He knows about those big game experiences, and I think he's worth a shot. Put it that way. I'm not nailing my England hat to the mast now and say Inter Miami are going to win the championship for the next 10 years. But I just think they needed to make a change. I think it's a positive change, and I think he can make a difference. I just think he'll represent and be a figurehead for the club in a way that perhaps Diego Alonso didn't. But again, the other front office hires are gonna help out. And if you see that Beckham is a bit more hands-on as well, then maybe it's more of a joint effort maybe potentially this season than it was last year, when it all just seemed just a little bit too fragmented. So look, I'll throw it over to you. So if you didn't want him in, who would you want to see there instead? I
mean, I would have liked Patrick Vieira, although reportedly he doesn't want to return to MLS at this point in his coaching career. But there's a whole world of candidates in this global sport that we call soccer or football, and getting someone that's as unproven as Phil Neville is just, to me, it's just not the right answer. I'm going to give him a fair shake. I'm going to see how he does, and but I'm not going to sit here and say I don't have questions as to what he can offer this team, if he can get this team to the level it wants to be at, because he just hasn't proven it. It's just, to me, it's a bit of a head scratcher. Obviously, it's against David Beckham's fingerprints are all over this one, which brings up an interesting question that I have. If time passes, let's say a season and a half or two pass, and Chris Henderson deems Phil Neville's work not to be good enough, does he have full authority to just say, hey, it's time to let this guy go? David, that's a decision I want to make? Or is it a longer conversation where now David Beckham has to be involved and say, well, not maybe not? Like, how is that going to work now? Because this is not, normally a sporting director comes in and he makes the coaching hire. But this time it's happened simultaneously, and the owners have picked the head coach, or at least one of the owners has picked the head coach. So does Chris Henderson have full authority to act on how he thinks and how he believes things could play out? I mean, it's a hypothetical question, but I don't know. I think the dynamic there is going to bear watching over the course of the next couple of years, for sure. I mean,
look, they're all grown men. They're all experienced within the game. I think that they'll probably sit down. Phil Neville's got an initial 2-year deal. They'll give it a year and they'll look at it and see how the first season went. And they're all, like I said, they're all big boys, and they'll sit down this time next year probably, and they'll look at it and they'll make a call on what they should do moving forward. So I mean, but that's for in the future. I think that the bottom line is he's been given that chance, and he has to do it for this season, and they'll take stock at the end of next season and see where they're at. Chris Henderson was in Seattle for 13 years, won 2 titles, vastly experienced, and he'll have input, and just as well as Phil Neville will and the rest of the coaching staff, and there's going to be another front office hire as well. So they're all going to work together. So it's a risk, just like any appointment. Nothing is guaranteed, is it, in life? Sure. So we can only wait and see. But I wouldn't totally write him off. He's got good coaching pedigree. You just got to look at his playing career to see that. I know it doesn't always replicate into. It doesn't translate. Yeah, it doesn't necessarily translate. And look, I'll agree with you that I think he will do or bring certain elements that Inter Miami maybe didn't have with Diego Alonso, right? He speaks English, so just in terms of doing media or marketing the team, he's now much more helpful in that regard, because now, for example, now the local news stations can be more engaged with the team, because now you have a head coach that speaks English, whereas before, they would have to have done a translation, and just the local news channels weren't doing that. So that's just one example of how I see there's boxes he can check off. But if we're talking just on the field, X's and O's, I mean, again, I'll give him his fair shake, but we'll see, because he's unproven, man. He's unproven. I mean, we don't know, do we? We literally don't know. But all we can do is look at his career.
Exactly. But why not go for someone more proven? Obviously any hire is a gamble. Any hire, dude. There's a world of candidates out there.
Name one other than Patrick Vieira. Then go on. Name a candidate we've not heard of. You're going to pull out some Peruvian guy from the
No. PSG's former head coach, Thomas Tuchel. He's out there. He's free. But why not make a run? Why not make a run? I mean, if you're gonna go foreign and you're gonna go unknown, why not go?
Would he leave PSG and go to? Obviously he left PSG, but he'd then go to Inter Miami, go to MLS. I mean, surely he'd be eyeing a job. No disrespect, but he'd be eyeing a job in Europe or
if Miami can pay, a handsome amount, then maybe he'd be enticed.
I don't think they would pay as much as a top Premier League team or a team in the Liga, but that's by the by. Does Thomas Tuchel need the money? Probably not. I don't think they're in a position to try and get a coach of that caliber. To be honest, I really don't.
I just gave you one name. I mean, again, if Thomas Tuchel is just one name, I'm just coming off the top of my head.
Gallardo was mentioned last time. River Plate. Would he want to leave River Plate?
But if it's a Beckham hire, he's probably not going to South America, right? But I think you could have gotten someone in Europe with your connections to David Beckham. I mean, they're always painted to be, he's got great connections, and everyone's always buzzing his phone and ringing his phone, and everybody wants to be involved with this great project. So I mean, just based off that alone, I would have to imagine there are other candidates that were maybe more proven, that they could have obviously taken a gamble on. Like, nothing is proven, nothing is certain in sports, but I don't know. I think a more proven option would have been better. We'll see how it goes once the team takes the field. And we'll talk about his style a little bit later on in the Q&A session, because we have some questions about him as a manager. Now, speaking of proven commodities, the other hire that was announced Monday was Chris Henderson. And he joins the team as the sporting director, the position he had initially interviewed for in 2018. He was a finalist for the position, but Inter Miami went with the decision to hire Paul McDonough instead. So Inter Miami, I guess, righting a wrong there maybe, and now making him the chief soccer officer and sporting director. I think this is a home run hire. I really like this hire for Inter Miami, whereas I have a lot of questions with regards to Phil Neville. I think the hiring of Chris Henderson is, one, overdue. They probably should have gone his route on the first round of interviews when they had made the hire the initial time. And I really like what I think he can do with this team.
And also in 2001 at the Miami Fusion, he was named the club's humanitarian of the year. So don't forget that. He's
a proven commodity in MLS. He's helped build the Seattle Sounders in what they are, which are a winning franchise, one of the most recognizable franchises in Major League Soccer, one of the biggest brands in MLS.
Well, his resume is fantastic. 13 years as sporting director at Seattle, two MLS Cups in 16 and 19, four US Open Cups, Supporters Shield, 4 Western Conference titles, and becoming the first MLS expansion team since 2005 to reach the postseason in each of its first 7 campaigns. So that is proper sort of, great, excellent material there to work with. So you'd think that someone of that vast experience was essential for anyone, especially European, coming to MLS, because it's such a different league in terms of travel and working and the way things operate. If they can dovetail together, which I'm sure they will, like many sporting directors. I went to Portland last summer and met Gavin Wilkinson, and you really felt like him and Gio Savarese really sort of mixed together and dovetailed off each other. So, was there that same correlation between Diego and Paul McDonough? Looking back now, you look at it and think, this sounds better, even though you're particularly not sure about the Neville hire, but love Henderson. They'll work together. They'll all work together between them. So it's like a new emphasis. So I think Chris Henderson's role should never be discounted. He's a vital role, but has such great experience.
Yeah. So in the interview that Inter Miami released today, Phil Neville touches on the Chris Henderson hire, and he says, we're starting our journey together. Obviously, he means their Inter Miami journey together, and I look forward to seeing how it works out. Again, I think, and we did say this. We touched on this on the last pod a month ago. I said if you had put Chris Henderson's resume down in front of me, I would have hired him if I was calling the shots. I think he's more than ready to lead a team and be the number one, which is one of the reasons he decided to leave the Seattle Sounders. I mean, I can read you the quote here from the team's press release. "This is an incredible opportunity to take the next step in my career, return back to South Florida, and solidify my mark on this league." That quote is money. It shows he's ambitious. It shows he's ready for this challenge. And I mean, again, I think it's a great hire. I can't stress that enough. Clearly, plenty of people around the league think that Inter Miami got it right.
Yeah, and Miami is a leading market, just like LA and New York. People look at Miami and they want to come here for the lifestyle, and also but for the project that the football club, soccer club are building. And Beckham, is the figurehead of that, and it makes it exciting and sexy and whatever. And it's an attractive proposition for anyone, regardless of what happened last season. It's still a newsy club. It's still interesting and newsworthy, and people want to be a part of it. So that's great.
Absolutely. And if he can replicate the same type of player acquisitions that he did in Seattle, then Miami will get to being, I don't know if they'll get to that peak level that they're talking about being one of the biggest teams in this hemisphere, but certainly among the best in Major League Soccer, because he's proven it not only with his acquisitions from within the league, but also from without the league. You look at a Peruvian striker like Raul Ruiz Diaz, not necessarily someone that everyone had on their radar before he arrived to Major League Soccer, but he's done a tremendous job since then. So, and Chris Henderson's role is not just on the first team. He's got control, or he's going to manage all levels of the sporting side of Inter Miami. So he's got a lot of power, a lot of control in the team now, which again, I think that they're in good hands in that spot. And Steve, I will also shamelessly plug that I reported last week that Chris Henderson was coming to Inter Miami. There's also news that someone else will come into the front office. Won't be up necessarily on the sporting side. It'll probably be on the business side. It'll be a foreign hire. So that's something to keep an eye on, because that has not yet been announced. So something to keep an eye on. We're going to take a quick break, and we'll come back to talk about the player moves that have happened over the past few weeks. Steve, it's been several weeks since we've had a pod, so there's been quite a bit of roster movement from Inter Miami. Some of the players that are gone are Ben Sweat, who was traded to Austin FC. Luis Robles called time on his career. He retired a couple of weeks ago. And Will Trapp and AJ De La Garza are now with Minnesota United and the New England Revolution, respectively. Inter Miami also, in terms of players incoming, they re-signed Breck Shea, and they traded for Patrick Segrist of the New York Red Bulls. And they signed an academy player in Felipe Valencia. Can't forget that as well. It's their first ever academy signing. Wouldn't be surprised if we see another couple this offseason. But clearly there's been a lot of roster movement as the team continues to prepare for 2021. Anything really notable for you on that end? Anyone that surprised you that came back, or that got brought in, or that left and went somewhere? Anything there of note for you?
Well, I mean, just the fact they've had to make all these changes. Clearly there were problems, with the roster that was built last season, and it's a shame that they've had to kind of move on. Quite a lot of the players that were brought in. So if anything, they're kind of not starting from scratch, but they're starting from a pretty clean slate again, which again just is symptomatic of all the changes that they've made. It's a shame about Luis Robles. I thought he did well when he was here. So that was a shame, because I think his experience is something you can't really buy, and I think he must have really added to the group. So that was a shame. He's also a great press conferences as well. So he's a great talker. It's always a shame to lose someone like that. But let's just hope now that they kind of know where they kind of made the mistakes last season.
Yeah, I mean, for me, out of all those moves, I mean, not too surprising, right? Thought Ben Sweat, even though his option was picked up, didn't think he was going to come back. Obviously, he had a lot of issues. Nothing's really overly surprising there. I mean, Will Trapp did say that he did assess maybe returning to Miami or not when he was signed by Minnesota United. So it was a possibility. It was an option, it looks like, but he opted to go to Minnesota. So nothing there really too surprising. Obviously, AJ De La Garza, maybe the best quote on the team last year, is off to the New England Revolution, which was reported on SBI Soccer. Another shameless plug. That's my third one. I've had a hat trick of them. So for me, the one that was a bit surprising, and there was a social media post that Inter Miami published about a little bit over a week ago maybe, saying goodbye to a number of players that had taken part in the 2020 season. And one of them, well, actually the first picture, was Andres Reyes, the young center back that Diego Alonso and Inter Miami staff were very high on. I rate him. I'm not a scout, but just from what I see with my eyes, my opinion of him is that he's going to turn out to be a really good player. Obviously needs a little more experience, a little more games to iron out the kinks that obviously hindered him and hindered the team in 2020. It was reported today by my editor, Ives Galarsep, that the New York Red Bulls are finalizing a deal to sign him. So Andrés Reyes will return to MLS in 2021. It just will not be with Inter Miami. I thought that's pretty surprising that Inter Miami did not find a way to bring him back into their books.
Exactly. I mean, but if they rated him so highly, why are they letting him go? So I again, it just smacks of a disconnect between Paul McDonough, Diego Alonso, the rest of the club. They seem to have got it wrong, or people have just been disagreeing with what, who's making that call that Reyes is going to leave when they rated him, or allegedly rated him so highly. Who's made that call? As we said a few weeks ago, people around the club have just spoken of it being very chaotic behind the scenes, a lot of mixed messages, not much communication. It was described to me as a mess. So that just sort of speaks a lot about these different moves and all these players going out. It wasn't a happy ship for a number of reasons, and that is the proof is in the pudding with so many players, allegedly some that are supposed to be the next Franz Beckenbauer or something like that, on their way out. So what can you do?
I think it came down to money. I think that's what happened there, because they had an option to buy him outright at the end of his loan, and they chose not to exercise that option. But they made it a point during their official press release to single him out and say they were still in negotiations to bring him back. He was the only player that they identified publicly that they were attempting to bring back. So they wanted to keep him. Now it's just a matter of if they couldn't come to an agreement on the financial figures. And I mean, that's the implication to me, that's why he's not coming back to Inter Miami. Again, we haven't been able to speak to anyone yet still. Hopefully that will change over the next week or so. Hopefully we'll have a formal Zoom press conference in the coming days with, maybe with Phil Neville, Chris Henderson, ownership. So we'll see, but I mean, to me, I think money was the issue there, and I think for Inter Miami that's a shame, because I think he's going to turn out to be a good one, not only in MLS, but I think someone that eventually gets sold to a club in Europe for a decent transfer fee, and that would have been good business for Inter Miami. But alas, they opted not to go that route. There were two players that were omitted from that farewell post that are not currently under contract with the team, and I think their omissions say something about their potential returns to Inter Miami in 2021, and those two players are Federico Higuain and David Norman Jr. David Norman Jr., youngster, didn't play at all in 2020, had a lot of injuries. I would say he's maybe more up in the air, but Federico Higuain, even before that post, I would have banked on him coming back. He's got ties with his brother Gonzalo. They're going to want to keep Gonzalo happy, so always expected Federico to come back. It hasn't been announced. That's not, it's not official, but I would imagine that we hear that sooner rather than later.
Yeah, we remember getting very excited when he arrived, and we never really saw the best of him. But I think that you need experience in these type of rosters, and I think he brings that. Effects sometimes are not just on the pitch; it's everywhere in the locker room and everywhere else. So the more experienced players you can keep, the better, especially if they've lost someone like Luis Robles. So it's been interesting, and I wonder how much Chris Henderson has been in the loop over the last few weeks. I know he's had a job in Seattle, but I'm sure they've kept him in the loop about various transfers, and I'm sure that he's well aware of Reyes and all the other guys. So he probably would have had his say. So don't be surprised if some of these moves have his sort of stamp on them as well.
I will say this is news, not a supposition. This is information. This is actual news. Paul McDonough obviously is no longer involved in the transition, right? When he was stepping down, they said in the press release he would help with the transition into the next front office hire. He was involved for several weeks, but as of at least a week or two now, he has not been involved in making any moves for Inter Miami. So from here on out, it'll be Chris Henderson and co calling the shots. Something else that's news is something that Will Trapp said at the beginning of the month, again, when he signed with Minnesota United. I'm going to just paraphrase it, because the biggest part of his longer-winded answer when I asked him about what went wrong with Inter Miami in 2020, why didn't it live up to the expectations that ownership and everyone had for it. And he said we were a collection of individuals. He chalked it up to that. And he never used the word identity, but based off of the longer-winded response, and you can read this piece on sbssoccer.com if you're not familiar with what I'm bringing up here, he talked about just the team never really understanding itself, never really finding that identity. And that's something that Phil Neville touched on a lot today during that interview that Inter Miami sent out. So, what did you make of Will Trapp's comments? Obviously, we've talked quite a bit about 2020, but maybe nothing surprising there. But just what did you think about him coming out and saying that?
Well, he's right, isn't it? Because when they played, they didn't really play too much of it as a team. There seemed to be that sort of proper team ethos. They showed it in patches, but just not enough. And look, we're not sat in the locker room, so we don't know. But maybe, Diego Alonso's man management skills perhaps were slightly lacking. There was that language barrier. I'm sure he understood English and could get his message across, but could he really properly get his message across to someone like Will Trapp and know that Diego had English speakers in his backroom staff as well? So
I actually heard during this offseason that, and this is information, that Diego Alonso would speak to the players in English. Sure. On an individual basis. Now, when it came to a larger team group setting, then maybe there he referred back to his native Spanish. So, but he did try to speak English to the players on occasion. Whether that transmitted fully his ideas or whether that worked, that's unclear, because obviously, like you just said, it was a jigsaw puzzle that was very poorly put together. The pieces did not fit, and you could see that. And that came not only with the coaching hire, with a foreign coach that's not familiar with MLS, to some of the player personnel decisions. We've touched on it quite a bit, so we don't need to tap into it too much. But I think it sheds a light again on the 2020 struggles, because we just haven't heard again from anyone since the end of the season. And you combine Will Trapp's comments with AJ De La Garza's after the playoff loss, and you start to see that this team, even though in the locker room I heard that the team got along really well, I heard from someone saying it was one of the best locker rooms that they've ever experienced in their career. So I think they were a unified group, at least behind the scenes, but whether that chemistry was there and the pieces actually fit together, that clearly was not the case. So
yeah, I think it's one thing if the players together, but then if the general setup, there are problems within the setup and how that's run, I think that's a different. I'm sure all the guys got on great, but I spoke to people who said that they'd seen stuff going on behind the scenes that they'd never witnessed before working in soccer. So something wasn't right. So they needed to make that change. They made the change now. For a complete fresh start with a very, very experienced guy in Chris Henderson, and then a less experienced guy, but in Phil Neville in terms of coaching. But I think his ability around the facility, as they like to call it, and the front office and the playing staff, maybe he will just be able to get them together and get them playing better than they were doing. But remember, like Gonzalez Perez, I think Higuain and Matuidi were the three players that we always kept bigging up, saying, these are the key guys. They didn't come in until halfway through the season. So that also needs to be taken into consideration.
Yeah. And I will read part of Will Trapp's quote here just so people have a little more context in case they didn't read the story. And then we can close out this segment. But he said, "I do not think we got to the point where we knew exactly what we were, and you could see it in the final game. You're playing another expansion team in Nashville that ultimately knew who they were, and they had put the system and the foundation in place to achieve that, and we were, again, a collection of individuals. Granted, it was a strong roster, and there were super, super high-level players, but it is a team game, so to try to make it all work, I think there was still something left on the table and something left wanting in that regard." So that, end quote, that is something Inter Miami clearly needs to address going forward, and I think that they will attempt to do so because Phil Neville said the word identity a lot in that interview. We're going to take another quick break, and we'll come back for the Q&A session and our final thoughts after this.
When the supporters come to the stadium, I think I want them to see the team play with an identity that say, yeah, this is an Inter Miami team, an exciting team that play a real open brand of football. We want to play technical football. We want to be aggressive. We want to play on the front foot. We want to go out and try and win every single game. I'm not a coach that likes to sit back. I said when I started my journey as a coach, I wanted to be as brave as possible. I wanted to try and win every single game of football, and I'm gonna stay true to those values at Inter Miami.
All right, Steve, it's Q&A time. Our first one of 2021. We'll do the same setup. I'll ask, and we can alternate responding, and then if the other one wants to add anything, then they can. So the first one comes from George at Will_your_way. Any news regarding the Super Draft with Miami? So I've heard that Inter Miami's looking for defenders. I heard they're looking at a few of them, potentially for that first round pick. So don't be surprised if they go the defensive route there, which makes sense given that right now they have, 2 center backs and then no one really behind Leandro Gonzalez-Pires and Nicolas Figal. So could be a center back, could be a right back, but I would expect more likely a center back. All right, the next question comes from Carlos J. Flores at Midweight152. And this one I'll let you answer, Steve. What's the difference in coaching style / formations likely used?
Yeah, I mean, certainly, I can only take what he did with the England women. I remember flying to Columbus for that first press conference when he was, when he took charge in 2018. He wanted them to play on the front foot. He wanted to be expansive. He wanted to play attacking football. And I think in the end, maybe that was slightly his downfall with the England women's team. They just maybe didn't have the strength and depth, technically wise, to play like that. But that was the way, I sound like a broken record, but keep on harking back to his footballing DNA. I know it's a cliche, but where he was brought up at Manchester United under Sir Alex Ferguson, one of the most expansive attacking teams that England have ever seen and probably Europe has seen in the last 25 years. Always on the front foot, had some obviously fantastic players around him. Very creative players. Cristiano Ronaldo at the time was a young kid coming through, was fantastic. You had Beckham, Paul Scholes, Ryan Giggs, Ruud van Nistelrooy, Dwight York, Andy Cole, all these, a great attacking talent. And that was what he was brought up on. You can imagine Diego Alonso working in Mexico and in Uruguay, maybe a bit more pragmatic, not as attacking. But that's I think he'll want to play like that. Whether or not he can play like that with the players at his disposal, that's the job now, isn't it? That's, can he get the right team together? But I think they've got a few things already in place where they can, they have Higuain, they have Matuidi, Gonzalez, Perez, that sort of core three, the backbone of the team, if you like, and then they have to try and build around it, and that's the job. That's why Henderson and Phil Neville paid the big bucks. But I expect him not to be as pragmatic as Diego Alonso. I think he'll probably have a go and be attacking and try and be on the front foot a bit more, which I think is what they could have done a little bit more of last season. Sometimes they were just a little bit too negative.
Yeah, he said that today and in that interview he said that he wants to be attack-minded, and he used the word brave. He wants his team to play in a brave way. So, I mean, that's what most coaches say during their hire, though, right? Most coaches come out and say they want to play attacking soccer or free-flowing soccer. You never really hear a coach in his introductory interview or press conference say, "Oh, well, I'm going to park the bus and hit on the counter." You don't normally hear that. And then, once the ball gets rolling, then reality sets in and people come more to terms of what kind of team they have, and they can adjust to that. But yeah, I mean, I don't know much about him as a coach, so I'll take your word on that, and we'll see how it plays out once the season gets going, which leads us to the next question from J.R. Reed. He also asked about Neville's style and if it will fit the desire of Mas, but we just touched on that. But this part is something interesting. He says, will there be a delay in the season if the players decide to strike? If so, can a deal be reached in time of the start of the season? So the players right now are in a bit of a situation, and I'm talking about players across all of MLS, not just Inter Miami, where the league wants to negotiate a new CBA yet again, and the players do not. So the players have said they will not strike, that they're not going to go on strike. However, the league could opt to have a lockout, and that could lead the season to being postponed, or suspended altogether. Right now, all of it is up in the air. Teams don't even have start dates for preseason right now. Normally, they start at the end of January, and I believe the initial target Inter Miami was working with was January 25th. That's when they initially thought they would start preseason, but that clearly is now not happening because of what's going on with MLS and these negotiations. So until that gets sorted, you probably aren't going to see an MLS schedule for when the season starts. And I think it's very likely that the season, I mean, this is just my opinion now, but I think it's very likely that the season does not start on time in 2021. I think it'll probably be mid to late March, maybe even April, which actually gives Miami some time to maybe make some deals and bring in some players, because if the season we're starting in the beginning of March, they'd have a little bit over a month to try to round out this roster. So maybe that's a good thing for Inter Miami, although we're definitely desperately waiting for soccer to pick back up here locally. Steve, next question comes from Getting Iggy With It. He says, how do you think all this changeover goes over with the players, especially guys like Higuain and Pizarro, who I'm sure were sold a specific vision and now maybe things have changed? Not sure about Higuain's relationship with Alonso, but I know Pizarro came here because of Diego.
Yeah, I mean, there was sort of a vision to come to Miami. We'll be great. We'll win loads of games, and it'll be a success. And it wasn't like that, was it? I definitely think, obviously the COVID situation played into the sort of weirdness of everything that went down. But look, I mean, they're paid to play football. Higuain and Matuidi are kind of getting towards in the twilight of their careers. They're experienced pros. They've seen managers come and go all the time. They'll get on with it. Pizarro is an interesting one, isn't it? Like you say, that was Diego's man, wasn't it? That he brought in wasn't particularly great. Didn't work out necessarily that well for him. So will they try and move him on and maybe spare up some money and get someone else? If that's a possibility? These are the questions that need to be answered, really. But only time will tell. Only time will tell once Neville gets working and gets stuck into training and everything like that. We'll have to wait and see if he can have that effect.
Yeah, I think for the players it's going to be interesting, right? Because there might be some players that are, really on board with the change, and maybe there might be some that are a little more reluctant to have a coaching change in year 2 of this project. Rodolfo Pizarro was probably told, hey, Diego wants you. We want to bring you to this team and to be one of the key players. Now, is that still the case, or does he still feel that way with a different coach that's not Diego Alonso, who he had a very close relationship with? I mean, that's to be determined. How do the South American guys view the coaching change and their roles in the team? I mean, maybe it does give you a bit of a refreshing change because of how poor things were last year, but I could also see some players, being a little worried or a little uncertain as to how they fit or what their role is going forward. So we'll see how the players adjust and acclimate to the whole thing. Also,
I'm just going to say,
sure.
At the moment, as we speak right now, we're not really sure what his backroom staff is going to be like. I think Diego only took one person with him when he left. So some of the same guys are there. Is he going to bring in a whole new backroom staff? That or could also change stuff if he keeps a lot of it the same. At least those players are aware of everyone else, of the coaching staff that have been there for the past year. So let's see what happens on that score as well.
Okay, so the next 2 questions, fairly similar. So it comes from Joseph Jeem 1 and from Red Space Cowboy, and they're both asking any ideas of who will be acquired at the club in this transfer window, or is there any potential news on transfers for Miami? There are some rumors out there. There have been some names linked. There was a goalkeeper that was mentioned, and I would imagine that some moves are more or less lined up right now. They just haven't been announced because, again, the team needs more players than it has right now. It's quite bare overall. So I would expect some moves. As for specific names, I mean, I don't have any specific names to bring up. Nothing I can report here. There is obviously a report that's come out last couple of days, Hamilton Campas. So that's something to keep an eye on. Sergio Romero's also been linked for the goalkeeping spot. So we'll see what the players that they go with. We'll see who they are, but I would expect news very, very soon. I think you could also expect maybe some signings from within, be it from the academy or maybe the USL team. So we'll see about that. Steve, I'll let you answer this next one. It's from Esteban. What will the identity of this team be?
I think they'll be on the front foot when they play. I think they'll try and be attacking. I think they'll try and play with a certain amount of style. I mean, it's how he was brought up and how Beckham was brought up playing for Man United, playing for England. Maybe not so much England. They probably weren't as good as Manchester United, but he'll want to sort of take the game to teams. But again, it's all about the recruitment, really, isn't it? Are they going to be able to get those players in, which will enable him to be able to play like that? So we'll just have to wait and see. But as we said before, I think he's going to be more attacking and that maybe more positive. And I just think hopefully they can maybe get a kind of a couple of really sort of decent name players in, or at least with good European or experience to try and fill the void left by the others. And maybe Pizarro will move on and maybe they could maybe use that to do something else there in that particular role. So it's going to be fascinating to see how it's going to unfold.
All right, Steve, the next one comes from Gabe P. He says, do you think Inter Miami will get any of these players this time around? And he's referring to the list of top prospects that MLSsoccer.com wrote up earlier today. Miami picks 10, so they could have a shot at one of those 10 players listed on there. But again, just to reiterate, I would expect them to be more inclined to go for a defender and a center back in that pick, and maybe even with one of their later picks in the draft. Not necessarily players that are going to come in and start regularly right away, but players that you can have for depth options and groom into something further down the road. Okay, next question comes from Andres. He says, Hamilton Campas is rumored to MLS and the club is likely to be Miami. What are your thoughts on this potential move? I don't know much about the player, but it seems to fit what they want to do. Next one comes from Prison Mike. He's got the Mike from The Office as his picture. He asks about the style as well, but we touched on that, so I'll just go to the second part of his question. What players do you think will benefit from the new style of football that the head coach will bring? So, Steve, any player in particular that you think is really going to benefit from Phil Neville's arrival?
Well, I mean, you just look at the attacking ones that they had last year. Lewis Morgan was great. I remember vaguely, it seems like years ago, doesn't it, when they played against Nashville in that playoff game, but there were the questions about where exactly he was playing. Sometimes he was playing a bit far left and he was part of a front three. We didn't really know. He could certainly benefit. I think Pizarro is the big question mark. What are they going to do with him if he stays? Are they going to try to get the best out of him? I think he would suit the type of football he's going to play. He's nice on the ball. He links the play nicely. He's got a good touch. What's he gonna do? What's going to happen there? I think they'll have to make a call on that relatively soon, because then they need to work the European transfer window, especially now, where it's the window's open now, but it closes in 2 weeks. So it's a race against time, really, to try and sort of get stuff done for the start of the season. If anything, the bigger name could maybe come midway through once the seasons in Europe have finished. But again, with everything that's going on right now, we don't know if the seasons are going to be delayed, if the Euros are going to happen, all this kind of things all up in the air. So there's so much work for them to do, mainly because of the mess that a lot of people made sort of last season. They have to sort out. They don't have a lot of time. So it's like I say, we're going to have to just watch this space and see what they can work out. But it's going to be difficult. It's going to be difficult. And I'm saying I'm not bigging him up. I'm saying I think it's a good appointment. It's an interesting appointment. It's a good opportunity for him. I think it's going to be a difficult job for him. It's absolutely going to be difficult. It's not going to be easy at all. He's picked up a fragmented squad that didn't do that great last season, and he has to turn them around. So he's up for the challenge, but it's not going to be easy. And I'm sure when we speak to him, he'll say that. He won't think anything's just a given just like that. He's experienced enough to know that you've got to work hard for it and try and work out your problems and everything like that and find solutions to them. So we'll have to wait and see.
Steve's going to give Phil Neville a very long leash this season. I can tell you it now. That's my prediction for 2021.
Clean slate, the honeycomb.
I'll say Gonzalo Higuain maybe has a lot to benefit from the type of soccer that Phil Neville apparently wants to play. Obviously, Gonzalo Higuain only scored 1 goal during the second half of last season, so his production can probably only go up from here, especially if he gets more service.
He's a great player.
Sure,
he's a great player.
Absolutely.
So it's just what they have around him. That's all.
Absolutely. So that does it for the Q&A session for this week. Steve, we'll wrap things up with our final thoughts, and you can go first there.
Look, clean slate, new year. Unfortunately, we've got some of the same problems, but they had to make a change. I know we said that Diego Alonso should be maybe potentially given time in a proper pre-season, but there were clearly problems. So they've made the call, they've made the appointment, and let's see what happens. But I definitely think putting my journalism hat, replacing my England hat, I think this makes the club more newsworthy. Not that the fans need to hear that, but I think it makes them more exciting. It gives it a new storyline. There'll be added impetus, and I think it translates well sort of worldwide for sure. That you've got the Neville Beckham sort of axis thing is an interesting story, and we'll see what happens. Beckham clearly wasn't happy. He's made changes. He's gone for his old mate, who he trusts, who he knows that he's had the same football education as he has. Is it going to work? I'm sure if you both sat down and had a beer with them both, they'll be positive. But you don't know, do you? You don't know until you try. So it's going to be interesting to see. But I just like the way that Beckham's just got hands on. He's made some calls and he's trying to do it his way, which is what we expected the first time around. But I think the time constraints were against him. So he's assessed it and he's made a change. And let's see what happens. It's his call. It's a big call. Let's see if it works out.
I'm a bit more cynical than you, admittedly so. So not sure I agree with a lot of that there. But I'll say this. David Beckham, we talked about during the second half of last season how he kind of faded into the background. It wasn't promoting the team as much. That was not only noted by us. I also heard players, within the team notice that as well. They noticed that withdrawal or that public withdrawal. So now he's fully engaged, fully on board, and putting his fingerprints much more on this team. So now we'll see him much more involved. I've heard he's going to be in Miami for quite a bit of time. Obviously, things are very tight and shut down in the UK because of COVID, and Florida, especially South Florida, is one of the more open, cities or markets, probably in all of the world. So I think he's going to be spending a lot more time in South Florida, and we're going to see now. It's going to be David Beckham's chance to see if the success that he has with all his brands carries over into on the field, because this team is his and Jorge Mas's, but obviously he's the face. So the success will be, or the failures will be, tied directly to him now more than ever. But that does it for this week's edition of the show. Please don't forget to give us a follow on all our social media channels and leave us a review on Apple Podcast. As always, I'm Franco Panizo, signing off here with Steve Brenner, and we'll be back next week, guys.